and joining us to discuss all things Venezuela, we're being joined now by Dan Kovalik. He's a professor of international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. All right, Dan, thanks for being with us today. So we have crossed, well, I should ask you, do you think we have crossed the Rubicon in Venezuela? If this U.S. intervention is, it seems, like all but inevitable.
Yes, and you asked me even a week ago whether the U.S. would militarily intervene in Venezuela. I would say highly unlikely. Slim to none would be the chances, because it seems absolutely foolhardy for many reasons. But it does appear, as you say, that a military intervention may be imminent, even though a number of countries, even Colombia, has expressed concern about such a strategy. But I am afraid that we may be crossing that Rubicon.
And we've seen the end result, Dan, of numerous U.S. interventions. Most recently in memory is Libya. Is Venezuela headed for the same fate as a failed state?
Well, I fear that, and it appears to be the strategy of the U.S. to create failed states around the world. I mean, the U.S. foreign policy and military policy appears to be to sow chaos, and then within that chaos, to be able to take control of other countries' resources. The quote that comes to mind is that of Eduardo Galeano, who wrote The Open Veins of Latin America. He says that every time the U.S. goes in to save a country, they turn it either into an insane asylum or a cemetery, and I'm afraid that that could be the fate of Venezuela if the U.S. invades.
Now, Dan, play along with me for just a second here. If we drop the U.S. intervention thought for just a minute, there is a contingent of the population in Venezuela who wish to see the country go capitalist. Is there any way to get there peacefully?
Yes, there is, through the ballot box. Again, we have to remember, despite what the mass media is telling us, that there are free and fair elections in Venezuela. And Nicolas Maduro has expressed some interest in holding earlier elections in order to make peace with the opposition. So certainly there is a peaceful path to that. However, I think the U.S. is not interested in a peaceful path because it's too slow and too uncertain. The U.S. wants to go in, smash the system that's there, and put up its own system. So it is possible, but from the U.S. Vantage point, I think they do not see that as an optimal solution.
So if Maduro somehow manages to cling on to power, where does this leave him and his ability to negotiate on a world stage? Do these events that have just transpired in the last couple of months, do they render him a feckless leader if he remains the leader?
I don't think so. First of all, he still has very, very important allies in China, in Russia, Iran, Turkey. Those are, some powerful countries right there. And Mexico, by the way, that has not abandoned him. Then the other thing is, look, the longer he weathers this storm, the more other countries will then accept him. Power is such that, it's 90% possession or whatever. If you're in power and you stay in power, people will respect it. So no, I don't think so. I think he continues to have some cards to play here.
We've seen people hang on to power amid, they resisted American quests to overthrow them, such as the Castro family in Cuba. How do you respond to that when people say, okay, the Cubans have been suffering for the 50, 60 years that they've been in power?
Well, look, the Cubans have certainly made a lot of sacrifices to continue to build socialism in Cuba. At the same time, we have to remember, Cuba has one of the best education systems in the world, one of the best healthcare systems in the world, and the people there have dignity. There have been sacrifices that have been made, but there's been a lot of gains as well that they've shared with the rest of the world, including with their medical brigade. So I think, the Cuban people have decided that what they have suffered due to fighting the U.S. embargo has been worth it for what they have gained. And I think that's the calculus people have to make, and that's the calculus the Venezuelan people will ultimately have to make here.
All right, we'll just have to hope for the best possible outcome, and hopefully that's peaceful, whatever it is. All right, Dan Kovalik, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, YouTube. Thanks for checking out